Being a creative generalist is fine until you want to get paid for it. Hi, I'm Nick, and this is the Green Room, and I have thoughts about things, and who knows? It's a jack of all trades. You don't do anything particularly special. You kind of know a little bit about everything, and you're a generalist. When I was 8, I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I don't know how you watch Star Wars or other big movies like that as a kid and then don't think, hey, I want to make a whole bunch of movies like that. I build the movies in my head and then want to bring them to life. And that's been my life ever since, is building movies in my head and games and whatever ever since, and not bringing them to life at all. I figured the best way to do this would be to become an animator. And in 1992, I wanted to make the very first fully computer animated movie, as if no one else existed, and I was in a complete vacuum. And that worked out well for me because I did. I made Toy Story. I'm kidding. I didn't make Toy Story. Oh my God. So I wanted to direct and even get in the trenches and animate, but I didn't write. So I figured in high school or something, I would make the movies, I would direct them, I'd do all storyboards and all that stuff, and I would get someone else to write the movie for me. And at that point, I was getting into graphic design and illustration so that I could project my ideas outwardly in a way that, it wasn't making the full movie, but I could at least convey parts of what I wanted to do, or parts of, just art, websites, stuff like that. And this was late 90s, early 2000s. So in 2002, right out of high school, well, not right out of high school, it was 6 months later, figuring out the money thing, I went to the Art Institute of Colorado, which can now rest promptly in hell. But I was in the Media Arts and Animation program, and I figured out before I left, unfortunately, that I didn't have the skills really to become an animator because I didn't really draw. And to be a really good animator, you have to kind of know how to draw. And that's even if you're doing 3D stuff. You still have to have that kind of mindset and those skills, essentially. So if I had stayed at the Art Institute, chances are I wouldn't have become a animator. Chances are if I would have stayed at the Art Institute, I would have switched to graphic design, and then that would have been a total different universe, and who knows what would have happened. And I never went back because, money. It was post.com bust, and things were just bad. So in the meantime, what I ended up doing was I started to learn to write, because there's no sense in me thinking about the pictures of these things if I don't know what the stories are. So I learned to write screenplays, and I even wrote a few, and you will probably never read them. And that's okay, because if were projects that never got off the ground, or they were just practice or whatever. This isn't me trying to be some hipster in a coffee shop oh yeah, I've definitely written 7 screenplays and whatever, I'm just ready to go, just pitching them at producers. In 2007, I got approved for some credit cards, which would wind me up in trouble years later, but for the time being, in 2007, it allowed me to buy camera equipment and audio equipment so that I could start making short films with my friends. And this was in the sketch comedy era of YouTube, back when there were still 10 or 15 minutes limits on what you could upload. So sketch comedy was perfect. So I would do stuff with my friends, and it was a lot of fun. There were some gems to this day, and there were some... But I don't regret it. I learned a lot, and I still will watch those videos from time to time and be like, man, what if I'd gone down that path? What if I'd just gone straight filmmaking? And at the accumulation of that in 2009, and we released it in 2010, I made a full-length documentary called Infinite Lives, The Road to E3, which was a project I'd been trying to get done for years, back when I had absolutely no idea how you make a full-length anything, much less a full-length documentary. And the only skills I had were really just based on all these individual small little things I could do, whether it was flash animation, whether it was graphic design, whether it was video editing from the short films, and blocking and cinematography and lighting and stuff like that. All these little skills I built up went into that documentary. And that original cut, the one that released, not very good. And I realize now, 10 years later, 11 years later, with a heart that cannot be hurt by it anymore. Why it didn't work, and it was boring. And so one of my passion projects is to one day go through the footage, which I do have. I still have all the original footage in that, and recut it, but that's a whole other thing, right? So I was figuring out all this stuff as I went along, and the idea floated around just kind of into the foreground, into the background, over and over was, well, geez, I could learn all this stuff individually. It would take me a while, and I still wouldn't have a complete education. So what if I went back to school and got that complete education? Because if you want to get a job, you should get a degree, right? They don't teach this stuff on the job anymore. This isn't the 50s. This isn't your grandpa wandering into a store with his resume and saying, hey, I want a job. Or a movie studio, hey, I saw you make movies here. And then they give him a job, and then 5 years later he's a director. And what a weird... Anyway. But choosing a degree with all of these acquired skills that I'd had at this point was a nightmare, because any direction I went was going to be A, something very specific that I didn't want to get so specific on, and B, it was going to be tens and thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe I get multiple degrees or something like that, but federal aid cuts out after a while anyway, and then you're paying private loans forever and blah, 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 blah. The thing was, I didn't end up getting a degree at all. So here I have, like, I know how to do, like, a bunch of these things, like, okay, and then that kind of comes together. So that's when I got into YouTube videos on my own. That's when I started doing essays, 8 to 15 minute long essays on video games, reviewing video games. And I learned that that's really where my skills get to go, because I get to write the scripts, I get to do the voiceover, I get to edit the voiceover, I get to summon and edit the footage together and do graphics and edit the audio together and all this fun stuff. And that's where I realized, like, that's where my skill set is, really. That is where my main channel is, and that's what I do on my main channel, and that's why I really would love it to be successful someday, so that I could, like, being a generalist, that's something I could do. And in recent years, I've been trying to find work as a creative full-time, and as a writer, as an artist, as an editor, or this or that. And everyone is better qualified in specific skills. You apply for a writing job, and there's 1,000 better writers. Or you apply for an editing job, there's 1,000 better editors who know all this other stuff. You try to work for a news station, you have all that proprietary knowledge from that college course you took to operate a TriCaster, stuff like that. So finding a job as a generalist is hard. Or at least it is in my experience. It feels like I'm in this director, producer position, like I am on my main YouTube channel, The Nth Review. But yeah, it's seeking a job like that as a creative generalist is a bit like saying, oh, I'm holding out for a management position. I'm sure if I were born into the rich parents club, I'd be able to have, the opportunity to grow and network and connect and self-fund and go to all the schools I wanted to on a whim, and have that Josh Trank, Damien Chazelle, J.J. Abrams trajectory of life, essentially. I know, exactly. So I get that creative generalists can pull it off and not feel like they're just shouting into the void, because that's what a lot of artists feel, is like, I have these skills, I produce this stuff that makes me feel good, but wouldn't it be great if I could be validated? Wouldn't it be great if I could make a living off of it? And I realize this is totally a rant, and that's totally fine, but I'm still working on it. And that's my dream. So, speaking of dreams, I have a main channel where I do gaming, long video game videos, and you should check it out. And it's at the thing that's on your screen right now. Go check it out. If you have some ideas about what I should have a think a thought, you can suggest something in the tip jar. you can. I can't guarantee that I'll actually do it. Like black licorice is better than red licorice, stuff like that. And don't forget to